They say therapists aren't supposed to feel anything beyond professional empathy. That we're trained to listen, to guide, to hold space without letting it touch us. For 3 years in Dubai, I believed I'd mastered that balance. And then Abel Kaimi walked into my office, desperate to save a relationship he was losing, and everything I thought I knew about boundaries started to blur. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the hardest part of helping someone isn't asking the right questions, it's knowing when to stop answering the ones they ask about you. If you enjoy listening to Afro-Korean love and romance stories, the kind that explore real emotion, cultural connection, and the complicated spaces where hearts meet, please subscribe. You'll want to stay for what comes next. My name is Shulamite Frankie. I'm a relationship therapist here in Dubai, and this is my story. I think I've already lost her. Abel Kaimi sat with his hands folded in his lap, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles had gone white. Shulamite Frankie watched him from across the low table, her notebook balanced on one knee, pen hovering above the page. She didn't write yet. She never wrote immediately. People needed space to breathe into their own words first, to hear what they'd just said and decide if they meant it. She'd learned that in her second year of practice, after a client told her the scratching of her pen made him feel like evidence being collected. "What makes you say that?" she asked. Abel looked up. His eyes were dark, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of poor sleep, not just one bad night. He was younger than she'd expected from his voice on the phone, maybe 30, though his face carried the careful neutrality of someone used to code switching. Korean features, neatly groomed, wearing a pressed button-down shirt despite the Dubai heat outside. He looked like a man trying very hard to hold himself together. "She doesn't talk to me anymore," he said. "Not really. She answers questions. She tells me about her day. But it's like she's giving a report. There's nothing underneath it." Shulamite nodded once, a small movement. "How long has this been happening?" 3 months. Maybe 4. He paused, reconsidering. "No. Longer. It started slow. I didn't notice at first." "And when you did notice, what did you do?" I asked her if something was wrong. His voice flattened. She said no. I asked again a week later. She said she was tired. I asked again, and she got angry. Said I was being paranoid. That I was making problems where there weren't any. How did that make you feel? Abel exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping. Like I was going crazy. Like maybe she was right and I was imagining it. He looked down at his hands. But I'm not imagining it. I know I'm not. Shulamite wrote something finally, a single line. Not his words, just a note to herself about the pattern she was already seeing. Classic relational dynamic, one partner withdraws, the other pursues, which causes more withdrawal, which causes more pursuit. A loop that fed itself until someone broke. Tell me about Layla, she said. Abel's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something softer. She's incredible. Brilliant. She works in finance, corporate law, actually. She's the only woman in her department. Arab woman, he clarified, though Shulamite had already noted the name. Her family is traditional. Conservative. They don't know about me. How long have you been together? 2 years. We met at a professional mixer. I teach at an international school, mathematics. She was there with colleagues. He looked up, and now there was something almost defensive in his voice. We were careful at first. We knew it would be complicated. Her family, my family, everyone had opinions. Your family has opinions about her? My mother thinks I should be with a Korean woman. He said it simply, without emotion, like he was reading a weather report. She's never said it directly, but I know. Every time I go home to Seoul, she introduces me to someone new. A friend's daughter. A colleague's niece. She doesn't ask about Layla anymore. Shulamite watched him. There was more underneath that statement, layers of expectation and disappointment he wasn't ready to unpack yet. She made another note. And Layla's family? They don't know I exist. If they did. He trailed off, shaking his head. They have someone picked out for her. A cousin. Second cousin, technically, so it's acceptable. He's a doctor. Emirati. They've been pushing her toward him for a year now. That must create a lot of pressure. It does. Abel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I understand why she can't tell them. I do. But sometimes I wonder if that's part of why she's pulling away. If she's decided it's too hard. That I'm too hard. Shulamite set her pen down. Abel, I want to be clear about something. My job here isn't to save your relationship. It's to help you understand what's happening in it, and to give you tools to communicate more effectively. But I can't make Layla feel differently, and neither can you. Do you understand that? He nodded, but she could see the resistance in his face. He didn't want tools. He wanted solutions. He wanted her to tell him exactly what to say to make Layla love him the way she used to. I need you to really hear me, Shulamite said, her voice gentle but firm. You can't control another person's feelings. You can only control your own actions and reactions. If Layla has decided to leave, there may be nothing you can do to change that. And if that's the case, the healthiest thing might be to accept it. I can't accept it. The words came out sharp, almost angry. Then he caught himself, softened. I'm sorry. I can't. Not yet. Not without trying. Shulamite picked up her pen again. Okay. Then let's try. But I need you to be honest with me, and with yourself. Can you do that? Yes. When was the last time you and Layla had a conversation where you both felt heard? Abel thought about it, his brow furrowing. I don't know. Months, maybe. Every time I try to talk about us, she shuts down. Or she gets defensive. Or she turns it around and says I'm being too needy. Are you being too needy? The question caught him off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it. I don't think so. I'm asking for basic things. Communication. Time together. She used to want those things too. People change, Shulamite said. Sometimes what they need from a relationship changes. That doesn't make you wrong for wanting what you want. But it might mean you're no longer compatible. We are compatible, Abel insisted. We were happy. We are happy. She's just going through something. What is she going through? I don't know. She won't tell me. Shulamite let the silence sit for a moment. This was the core of it, the thing he kept circling back to. Layla had closed herself off, and Abel was standing outside the door, knocking harder and harder, unable to understand why she wouldn't let him in. Can I ask you something personal? Shulamite said. Of course. Why are you here instead of her? Abel blinked. What do you mean? You're the one in therapy. You're the one seeking help. But this is a relationship issue. It involves both of you. So why isn't she here? She doesn't believe in therapy. Or she doesn't want to fix this. The words landed heavy. Abel flinched just slightly, but Shulamite saw it. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. But sometimes you had to. Sometimes people needed to hear the thing they were most afraid of so they could start dealing with it. I'm not saying that to hurt you, Shulamite said quietly. I'm saying it because it's a possibility you need to consider. If Layla wanted to work on this relationship, she'd be working on it. The fact that she's not, that tells you something. Abel was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. So what do I do? You stop chasing her. He looked up sharply. What? You stop chasing her, Shulamite repeated. Right now, you're in a pursuer-distancer dynamic. The more you pursue, the more she distances. It's a cycle. And the only way to break it is to step back. But if I step back, she'll think I don't care. Maybe. Or maybe she'll finally have the space to miss you. To realize what she's losing. Or maybe she won't, and you'll have your answer. Shulamite leaned forward slightly. Abel, you can't love someone into staying. You can't convince them or logic them or sacrifice enough to make them choose you. All you can do is be honest about what you need, respect yourself enough to maintain your boundaries, and let them make their own choice. That sounds like giving up. It's not giving up. It's letting go of control you never had in the first place. Abel sat back, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, defeated. Shulamite felt the familiar pang of empathy that came with this work, the desire to make it easier for him somehow. But she couldn't. This was his pain to sit with, his process to move through. I'm going to give you some homework, she said, shifting gears. Before our next session, I want you to write down 3 things. First, what you need from Layla to feel secure in this relationship. Not what you want, what you actually need. Second, what you're willing to compromise on, and what you're not. And third, what you'll do if she can't meet those needs. And then what? And then you talk to her. Not about what she's doing wrong. Not about how you feel neglected. You tell her, calmly and clearly, what you need. And you listen to what she needs. And you see if there's a way forward that honors both of you. And if there's not? Then you'll know. Abel nodded slowly. He looked like he wanted to argue, to push back, but he didn't. Instead, he just sat there, processing. Shulamite gave him the time. This was always the hardest part, the moment when people had to confront the reality they'd been avoiding. Can I ask you something? Abel said finally. Of course. Have you ever been in love with someone who didn't love you back? The question was direct, personal in a way that crossed the usual boundaries of therapy. Shulamite could have deflected, should have deflected, but something in his face, the raw vulnerability there, made her answer honestly. Yes, she said. What did you do? I let them go. Did it get easier? Eventually. She paused. But not right away. Abel nodded, seeming to take some small comfort in that. They sat in silence for another moment, and then Shulamite glanced at the clock on the wall. 50 minutes. Their time was almost up. We'll continue this next week, she said, closing her notebook. Same time? Same time. Abel stood, gathering his things. He moved slowly, like someone carrying a great weight. At the door, he paused and turned back. Thank you, he said. For being honest. That's my job. No. I mean, thank you for not just telling me what I want to hear. Shulamite nodded. I'll see you next week, Abel. After he left, she sat alone in the office for a long time, staring at her notes. She'd given him good advice, practical, measured, professionally sound. But there was something about this case that unsettled her, though she couldn't quite name what it was. Maybe it was the look in his eyes when he talked about Layla. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd answered his question truthfully when she should have maintained her professional distance. She closed her notebook and stood, moving to the window. Outside, Dubai stretched out in all directions, glass and steel and endless ambition. She'd moved here 3 years ago for the work, for the opportunity to build something of her own. She'd left behind a complicated family, a country that never quite felt like home, and a version of herself she'd been trying to escape. Now she sat in rooms with strangers and helped them untangle their lives, offering clarity she wasn't always sure she had herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister in Atlanta, "Call me when you can. Miss you." Shulamite looked at it for a long moment, then set the phone face down on her desk. She'd call later. Right now, she needed to write up her session notes, needed to maintain the boundaries between her work and her life. But as she sat back down and opened her laptop, her mind kept returning to Abel's question. Have you ever been in love with someone who didn't love you back? Yes. She had. And she'd survived it. But surviving wasn't the same as healing, and sometimes she wondered if she'd ever really let herself try. The next week passed in a blur of clients and paperwork. Shulamite saw 5 other people before Abel's appointment came around again, a couple navigating infidelity, a woman processing divorce, a man struggling with anger management, 2 expats dealing with isolation and depression. Each session was its own contained world, its own set of problems and pain. She was good at this work. She knew she was good at it. But she also knew the toll it took, the way it required her to be endlessly present and patient while maintaining enough distance not to drown in other people's emotions. By the time Abel arrived for his second session, Shulamite was tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. But she put on her professional face, greeted him warmly, and settled into her chair across from him. "How was your week?" she asked. "Difficult." Abel looked different today, still exhausted, but there was something sharper in his expression, something more resolved. "I did the homework. I wrote everything down." "Good. Do you want to share it with me?" Abel pulled out his phone, opened a notes app. "What I need from Layla," he read, "is honesty. Communication. To feel like I'm a priority in her life, not just an obligation. To know that she's committed to making this work." Shulamite nodded, writing. "And what are you willing to compromise on?" "Time. I understand she's busy with work. I understand she needs space. I can compromise on how much we see each other, how much we talk. But I can't compromise on the quality of our communication when we do." "That's fair. And what will you do if she can't meet your needs?" Abel looked down at his phone, but he didn't read from it. Instead, he just said, quietly, "I'll end it." Shulamite felt something shift in the room. This was progress's painful progress, but progress nonetheless. Abel had moved from desperate clinging to acceptance of a hard truth. "Have you talked to her yet?" "Yes. Last night." "How did it go?" Abel set his phone down, rubbed his eyes. "Not well. She said I was being unfair. That she's under a lot of pressure and I'm not being understanding. That I'm asking too much." "And what did you say?" "I told her I wasn't asking too much. That wanting to feel loved and prioritized wasn't unreasonable. That if she couldn't give me that, I needed to know." "How did she respond?" "She cried." Abel's voice cracked slightly. "She said she did love me. That she was sorry. That she'd try harder. But then this morning, it was like the conversation never happened. She was distant again. Cold." Shulamite set down her pen. "Abel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Do you think Layla wants to be in this relationship?" He was quiet for a long time. Finally, "I don't know. I think she wants to be in it. But I don't think she actually does." "Why do you think that is?" "Because it's hard. Because her family would never accept me. Because it's easier to be with someone who fits into her world." He laughed bitterly. "I'm a complication. I always have been." "You're not a complication," Shulamite said firmly. "You're a person. And you deserve to be with someone who sees you as more than an obstacle to manage." Abel looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. It was gratitude, yes, but also something else, something she couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing her, really seeing her, not just as his therapist but as someone who understood what it meant to feel like you didn't quite fit. She looked away first, refocusing on her notes. Boundaries. She needed to maintain boundaries. I think you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this relationship is ending, Shulamite said, keeping her voice steady and professional. Not because you've failed, but because sometimes people grow in different directions. Sometimes love isn't enough. I know, Abel said quietly. I've known for a while, I think. I just didn't want to admit it. Admitting it is the first step. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Abel asked, what happens after? After you admit it's over? You grieve. You let yourself feel the loss. And then, eventually, you move forward. Does it always feel this impossible? At first, yes. But it gets easier. I promise. Abel nodded, but he looked unconvinced. Shulamite wanted to say more, wanted to offer some guarantee that he'd be okay, but she couldn't. She could only hold space for his pain and trust that he'd find his way through it. The session ended shortly after. As Abel stood to leave, he paused at the door again, just like last time. Can I ask you something? He said. Shulamite felt a small warning bell go off in the back of her mind, but she nodded. Of course. Why did you become a therapist? It was an innocent question, the kind clients asked sometimes when they were trying to understand the person sitting across from them. But something about the way he asked it, the genuine curiosity in his voice, made it feel more personal than it should. I wanted to help people, Shulamite said, which was true but not the whole truth. That's what everyone says. But why really? She hesitated. This was the moment where she should redirect, where she should maintain her professional boundaries and keep the focus on him. But there was something about Abel, about his openness, his vulnerability, that made her want to be honest. Because I spent most of my life not being understood, she said finally. And I thought if I could understand other people, if I could help them feel seen, maybe that would mean something. Abel nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense to him. Do you feel understood? Now, I mean. Sometimes. But not always. No. Not always. They looked at each other for a moment, and Shulamite felt it again, that sense of recognition, of being seen. It was the same feeling she'd had earlier, but stronger now, more undeniable. And it was dangerous. She could feel how dangerous it was, how easily this could shift from professional to personal if she let it. I'll see you next week, she said, deliberately stepping back from the moment. Abel seemed to understand. He nodded, said goodbye, and left. After he was gone, Shulamite sat at her desk and stared at her notes without really seeing them. She was thinking about boundaries, about the careful line she walked in this work between empathy and entanglement. She was thinking about Abel's question, why did you become a therapist, and her answer, which had been more honest than she'd intended. She was thinking about the way he'd looked at her, like she was saying things he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. And she was thinking about how much she'd wanted to keep talking to him, to let that conversation go deeper, to drop the pretense of therapist and client and just be two people trying to understand each other. She closed her notebook decisively. This was exactly why boundaries existed. Because the work was intimate, and intimacy could blur lines, and blurred lines led to mistakes that hurt everyone involved. She wouldn't make that mistake. But even as she told herself this, she couldn't quite shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, something subtle and unspoken, but real. And she didn't know what to do about it. The following days were strange. Shulamite found herself thinking about Abel more than she should, not in a romantic or sexual way, but in the way you think about a conversation that didn't quite finish, a question that didn't quite get answered. She caught herself wondering how his next conversation with Layla would go, whether he'd finally accept that the relationship was over, how he'd handle the grief when it came. These weren't unusual thoughts for a therapist to have. She cared about her clients, invested in their progress, thought about them between sessions. But there was something different about this, something that made her uneasy. She mentioned it to her supervisor during their weekly check-in, an older Sudanese woman named Dr. Amara who'd been practicing for 30 years and had seen everything. I have a client, Shulamite said carefully. He's dealing with a deteriorating relationship. Everything is appropriate, professionally. But I find myself thinking about his case more than usual. Being more invested than I should be. Dr. Amara looked at her with kind, knowing eyes. What do you think that's about? I don't know. Maybe because his situation resonates with me somehow. Or maybe because he's very open, very vulnerable, and that makes the work feel more meaningful. Or maybe, Dr. Amara said gently, you're lonely, and he reminds you of that. The words hit harder than Shulamite expected. She started to protest, then stopped. Was that it? Was she projecting her own isolation onto Abel's situation, finding connection in a professional relationship because she didn't have it elsewhere in her life? I'm not crossing any boundaries, Shulamite said, more defensively than she'd intended. I know you're not. But you need to be aware of what's happening internally for you. Because if you're using this therapeutic relationship to meet your own emotional needs, even unconsciously, that's not fair to him or to you. Shulamite nodded, feeling chastened. Dr. Amara was right, of course. She was always right. But acknowledging it didn't make it easier. What should I do? Be mindful. Keep checking in with yourself. And if you find that you're unable to maintain appropriate professional distance, refer him to someone else. I don't want to abandon him in the middle of his process. Then don't. But watch yourself. And be honest about what you're feeling. That conversation stayed with Shulamite for the rest of the week. She tried to take Dr. Amara's advice, tried to examine her own motivations and feelings with the same clinical clarity she applied to her clients. But it was hard. It was always hard to be objective about yourself. By the time Abel's third session arrived, Shulamite had convinced herself she had it under control. She'd been overthinking things, reading too much into a simple professional connection. She'd maintain her boundaries, do her job, and everything would be fine. But the moment Abel walked into her office, she knew it wasn't going to be that simple. He looked different, lighter, somehow, despite the obvious exhaustion still carved into his features. There was a resolution in his posture that hadn't been there before. I ended it, he said, sitting down. No preamble, no small talk. I broke up with Layla. Shulamite felt her heart do something complicated in her chest, sympathy, relief, and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. How do you feel? She asked. Terrible, Abel said honestly. But also, relieved? Is that normal? Completely normal. You can grieve a relationship and still recognize that ending it was the right choice. Those feelings can coexist. It was the right choice, Abel said, more to himself than to her. I know it was. But it doesn't feel right yet. Tell me what happened. Abel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I tried one more time. I told her exactly what I needed, just like we talked about. And she got angry. Really angry. Said I was being manipulative, giving her ultimatums. That I was selfish for not understanding what she was going through. And you said? I said that I did understand. That I'd been understanding for months. But that understanding didn't mean accepting being treated like an afterthought. And that if she couldn't prioritize our relationship, I couldn't stay in it. That took courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like giving up. It wasn't giving up, Shulamite said firmly. It was choosing yourself. That's different. Abel looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You always say that, choosing yourself. Like it's simple. It's not simple. But it's necessary. Even when it means losing someone you love? Especially then. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Abel said, quietly, she called me this morning. Asked if we could talk. Said she made a mistake. What did you say? I said no. He looked down at his hands. She cried. begged me to reconsider. Said she'd do better, be better. And I almost believed her. But you didn't. No. Because I've heard it before. And nothing ever changes. He looked up at Shulamite. That's progress, right? That I didn't go back? That's enormous progress. Then why does it feel so awful? Because you're mourning what you wanted that relationship to be, not just what it was. You're mourning the future you'd imagined, the version of Layla you hoped she could become. That's a real loss. Of course it hurts. Abel nodded, but his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Shulamite felt the familiar ache of witnessing someone else's pain, the desire to reach across the space between them and offer physical comfort. But she kept her hands still, her posture professional. What do I do now? Abel asked. How do I move forward? One day at a time. You let yourself feel what you're feeling. You lean on friends, family. You focus on work, on hobbies, on things that make you feel grounded. And you remember that this feeling won't last forever. Do you promise? The question was almost childlike in its need for reassurance. Shulamite wanted to promise, wanted to tell him with certainty that he'd be okay. But she couldn't. I can't promise, Shulamite said gently. But I can tell you that in my experience, people are more resilient than they think. You'll surprise yourself. Abel wiped at his eyes quickly, almost embarrassed. Sorry. I don't usually. Don't apologize for having emotions. That's what this space is for. He nodded, composing himself. They spent the rest of the session talking through practical things, how to handle inevitable run-ins with Layla in their overlapping social circles, how to resist the urge to check her social media, how to sit with the loneliness that would inevitably come. By the time Abel left, Shulamite felt confident they'd made real progress. But after he was gone, she sat alone in her office and realized her hands were shaking slightly. She'd been so focused on maintaining professional boundaries that she'd almost missed what was actually happening. She was getting attached. Not romantically, at least, she didn't think so, but emotionally. She cared about Abel's well-being in a way that went beyond clinical interest. She found herself hoping he'd text between sessions to let her know he was okay. She thought about him at odd moments, wondered if he was eating, sleeping, taking care of himself. It wasn't appropriate. Dr. Amara would have told her that immediately. But Shulamite also knew that caring about clients wasn't inherently wrong. The question was whether that care was interfering with her ability to do her job effectively. She pulled out her phone and texted Dr. Amara, "Can we schedule an extra supervision session this week? I need to process something." The response came quickly, of course. "Tomorrow afternoon?" Shulamite confirmed and set her phone down. She'd figure this out. She always did. But that night, lying in bed in her apartment overlooking the Dubai Marina, she found herself thinking about Abel's question, "Have you ever been in love with someone who didn't love you back?" Yes. She had. His name was Marcus, and it had been 5 years ago, back in Atlanta. He'd been a colleague, a fellow therapist, someone she'd respected and admired. They'd been close friends first, and then, for her, at least, something more. But he'd been in a relationship, committed to someone else, and she'd never told him how she felt. She'd left Atlanta partly because of that. Because staying meant watching him build a life with someone else, meant swallowing her feelings every time they worked together. It had been easier to leave, to start over somewhere new, to tell herself she was being brave and adventurous rather than running away. She hadn't thought about Marcus in months. But talking to Abel had brought it all back, that specific ache of wanting someone you couldn't have, of knowing the timing was wrong or the circumstances were impossible, of having to choose between your feelings and your integrity. She'd chosen integrity. She'd always chosen integrity. But sometimes she wondered what might have happened if she'd been brave enough to be honest, to risk the friendship for the possibility of something more. Probably nothing. Marcus had loved his girlfriend, eventually married her. Shulamite had seen the photos on social media before she'd finally unfollowed him. They looked happy. They probably were happy. And she was here, in Dubai, helping other people navigate their relationships while her own emotional life remained carefully controlled and isolated. The irony wasn't lost on her. The next afternoon, Shulamite sat in Dr. Amara's office and tried to articulate what she was feeling. "I'm worried I'm getting too invested in this client," she said. "Not in an inappropriate way. I'm not attracted to him. I'm not fantasizing about a relationship. But I care about him more than I should. I think about him between sessions. I worry about how he's doing." Dr. Amara listened with that patient, knowing expression she always wore. "What do you think this is really about?" "I don't know. Maybe what you said before, that I'm lonely and he's filling some kind of void." "Are you lonely?" Shulamite hesitated. It felt vulnerable to admit, even to her supervisor. "Yes. I think I am. Tell me about your social life here. Your support system." "I have colleagues. We go out sometimes, grab dinner or drinks. I have a few friends from yoga, from the expat community. We text, make plans occasionally. But no one close?" "No. No one close." Shulamite looked down at her hands. "I'm not good at that, at letting people in. I never have been." "Why do you think that is?" "Because it's safer not to. Because people leave. Because vulnerability leads to pain." Dr. Amara nodded slowly. "And yet here you are, in a profession that requires you to hold space for other people's vulnerability every single day. Don't you see the contradiction?" "Of course I do. But that's different. That's controlled. Professional. I know the boundaries, I know the rules. My personal life is messier." Life is messy, Shulamite. Relationships are messy. And you can't spend your entire life protecting yourself from that mess without also protecting yourself from genuine connection. Shulamite felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back. "What does this have to do with Abel?" "I think you recognize something in him. His fear of being alone, his difficulty trusting that someone will stay, his tendency to intellectualize his emotions rather than feeling them. These are all things I've observed in you. So what, I'm projecting? I think you're connecting. Which isn't wrong, Shulamite. Therapist and client can connect. But you need to be aware of what that connection is really about. And you need to make sure it's serving him, not you." Shulamite nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. "So what do I do?" "You continue to do your job. You maintain your boundaries. And you also start doing some of your own work, real work, with your own therapist, to address the loneliness and isolation you're feeling. Because you can't help other people heal if you're not healing yourself." "I know. Do you?" "Because I've been supervising you for 3 years, and in all that time, you've never once mentioned being in therapy yourself. You've never talked about your own relationships, your own struggles. You show up, you do excellent work, and then you disappear back into your private life. That's not sustainable." Shulamite felt exposed, defensive. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm asking for help." "You're asking for help managing a professional boundary. That's not the same as asking for help with your own emotional well-being." Dr. Amara leaned forward slightly. "Shulamite, I say this with genuine care and concern, you're an excellent therapist. But you're also human. And you need support just like anyone else." "I know." "Then actually do something about it. Find a therapist. Make time for genuine friendships. Let people in, even if it's scary. Because if you don't, you're going to burn out. Or you're going to keep forming these intense professional attachments that feel like connection but actually aren't." The words stung, but Shulamite knew they were true. She'd been running for 5 years, from Marcus, from Atlanta, from her own need for intimacy. She'd built a life that looked successful on the outside but felt hollow on the inside. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Don't think. Do." Dr. Amara's voice was firm but kind. "And in the meantime, with this client, continue seeing him. But watch yourself. Check in with me regularly. And if you feel like you're crossing a line, even internally, we'll discuss referral options." Shulamite agreed, though the thought of referring Abel to someone else made her chest ache in a way that proved Dr. Amara's point. After she left the supervision session, Shulamite walked along the marina, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. She thought about everything Dr. Amara had said, about loneliness and connection and the ways she'd been protecting herself. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name, Dr. Sarah Chin, a therapist she'd met at a conference last year who specialized in working with other mental health professionals. She'd never reached out, never made the call, always told herself she was fine, she could handle things on her own. But she wasn't fine. And maybe it was time to stop pretending she was. She sent a text, "Hi Sarah, this is Shulamite Frankie. We met at the mental health conference last year. I'm reaching out because I think I could use some support navigating some personal things. Would you have availability for a new client?" The response came within minutes, "Hi Shulamite. I remember you. Yes, I have some availability. Let's set up an initial consultation. How does next week look for you?" They arranged a time. And for the first time in months, Shulamite felt like maybe she was moving in the right direction, not away from something, but towards something. Abel's 4th session was different. He came in looking better, still tired, still grieving, but there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before. He sat down and immediately said, "I think I'm starting to understand something." "What's that?" "Why I was so desperate to make things work with Layla. It wasn't really about her. It was about proving something to myself." Shulamite leaned forward slightly. "What were you trying to prove?" "That I was worth staying for. That I was enough." He paused, considering. "My whole life, I've felt like I had to earn love. Like if I just worked hard enough, was good enough, perfect enough, people would choose me. But they never did." "Not really. Tell me more about that." Abel looked out the window, his expression distant. "I'm the middle child. My older brother is the golden child doctor, married to a nice Korean woman, gave my parents grandchildren. My younger sister is the baby, the artistic one, the free spirit they indulge. And I'm just in the middle. The one who's supposed to be stable and reliable but never quite special. That sounds lonely." It was. It is. He looked back at her. "When I met Layla, I thought, finally, someone who sees me. Someone who chooses me. But now I realize she never really did. She chose the idea of me, the secret boyfriend who was safe because he was impossible. The moment things got real, the moment I asked for more, she pulled away. That must have been painful to realize." It was. But it's also freeing? Because it means it wasn't my fault. I didn't fail. The situation was impossible from the start." Shulamite felt a swell of pride for him. This was real growth, the kind that came from sitting with pain rather than running from it. "You're right. You didn't fail. You both wanted different things. That doesn't make either of you wrong." "I keep waiting to feel angry at her," Abel said. "But I mostly just feel sad. Sad for both of us. We could have been good together if the circumstances were different. But they weren't different. No. They weren't." They talked for a while longer about acceptance, about the process of letting go, about how to move forward without bitterness. And then, toward the end of the session, Abel asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" Shulamite felt that familiar warning bell, but she nodded. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." Abel smiled slightly. Do you ever feel like you're living half a life? Like you're present for other people but absent from your own experience? The question hit too close to home. Shulamite had to take a moment before responding. Yes. I think a lot of people in helping professions feel that way. How do you deal with it? I'm working on it, she said honestly. It's not easy. But I'm trying to be more present, more engaged with my own life. That's good, Abel said, and there was something in his voice of warmth, genuine care, that made Shulamite's chest tighten. Our time's almost up, she said, redirecting before the moment could become more than it should be. Abel stood, gathering his things. At the door, he turned back. Thank you. For everything. I know this is your job, but it doesn't feel like just a job. It feels like you actually care. I do care, Shulamite said, and meant it. That's part of the work. After he left, she sat in the quiet office and tried to untangle what she was feeling. Care, yes. Professional investment, absolutely. But also something else, a sense of kinship, of recognition, of understanding that went beyond the therapeutic relationship. She thought about Dr. Amara's words, you're connecting. Which isn't wrong. But you need to be aware of what that connection is really about. What was it really about? Maybe it was about two people who'd both spent their lives feeling slightly out of place, slightly not enough. Maybe it was about the way loneliness recognized loneliness, even across professional boundaries. Maybe it was about the comfort of being understood, even in the structured confines of a therapy session. Or maybe it was about something simpler and more dangerous, the fact that she looked forward to his sessions in a way she didn't look forward to others. The fact that she thought about him between appointments. The fact that when he walked into her office, something in her chest loosened, like she could breathe a little easier. She needed to be careful. She needed to maintain her boundaries, do her job, not let her own needs interfere with his healing process. But as the weeks passed, that became harder and harder to do. Abel's sessions became the highlight of Shulamite's week. She tried not to think about what that meant, tried to tell herself it was just because he was making such good progress, because the work was rewarding. But she knew it was more than that. He was funny, she discovered. Once the acute pain of the breakup started to fade, his sense of humor emerged, dry and self-deprecating, with a quick wit that caught her off guard. He was thoughtful, asking questions that showed he'd been processing their conversations between sessions. He was curious about the world, about people, about himself. And he was kind. That was the thing that got to her most, his fundamental kindness, even in pain. During their 6th session, he told her about running into Layla at a mutual friend's event. It was awkward, he admitted. But not terrible. She asked how I was. I asked how she was. We both said fine and knew we were lying. How did you feel seeing her? Sad. But not in the way I expected. Not longing or regret. Just sad that we couldn't make it work. Sad that we hurt each other. That's a healthy response. Is it? Abel looked at her curiously. I thought I'd feel more. Either desperate to get her back or angry that she's moved on so easily. But I mostly just feel neutral. That's growth. You're processing the loss without getting stuck in it. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. But you're doing it anyway. That's what matters. Abel smiled, and Shulamite felt that dangerous warmth again. She looked down at her notes, refocusing. Have you thought about dating again? She asked, keeping her voice professional. Not really. It feels too soon. And honestly, I don't know if I trust myself to choose better next time. What do you mean? I chose someone who couldn't really be with me. That says something about me, doesn't it? Maybe I'm attracted to unavailability. Maybe I sabotage myself. Or maybe you fell in love with someone before you fully understood the situation, and you stayed longer than you should have because leaving felt like failure. That's human. It doesn't mean you're broken. Abel looked at her for a long moment. You're good at this. At making people feel like they're not disasters. You're not a disaster. I'm working on believing that. By the 8th session, Shulamite could no longer deny what was happening. She was emotionally attached to Abel in a way that went beyond professional concern. She looked forward to his appointments. She thought about him between sessions. She wondered about his life outside their Thursday afternoon meetings. And the worst part, the part that made her lie awake at night with guilt and confusion, was that she suspected he felt something too. Nothing overt, nothing he'd said or done explicitly. But there was a quality to the way he looked at her, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he seemed reluctant to leave at the end of each session. It was dangerous. It was inappropriate. And she needed to do something about it. She scheduled another supervision session with Dr. Amara. I need to refer him, Shulamite said immediately, sitting down. The client we discussed. Abel. I need to refer him to someone else. Dr. Amara studied her carefully. What's happened? Nothing. Nothing's happened. That's the problem. Nothing's happened, but I'm worried it could. I'm too invested. I care too much. It's interfering with my objectivity. Has he expressed any inappropriate feelings toward you? No. Not explicitly. But there's something. A tension. An awareness. And I can't keep pretending it's not there. Have you done anything to encourage this dynamic? No, Shulamite said firmly. I've maintained all professional boundaries. I've never touched him beyond a handshake. I've never shared personal information beyond what's therapeutically relevant. I've done everything right. Then why do you feel like you need to refer him? Because I'm thinking about him when I shouldn't be. Because I look forward to his sessions in a way that feels unprofessional. Because when he talks about maybe dating again someday, I have to work not to feel. She stopped, appalled at what she'd almost said. Not to feel what? Dr. Amara asked gently. Shulamite closed her eyes. Jealous. I have to work not to feel jealous. And that's not okay. That's a boundary violation, even if it's only internal. You're right. It's not okay. Dr. Amara's voice was kind but firm. But Shulamite, you haven't acted on these feelings. You've recognized them and sought supervision. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. But I can't keep seeing him. Not feeling like this. Can I ask you something? Do you think these feelings are really about him? Or are they about something else? Shulamite opened her eyes. What do you mean? You've been working with me for 3 years. You're an excellent therapist. You maintain appropriate boundaries with all your other clients. So why him? What is it about Abel specifically that's triggering this response? Shulamite thought about it, really thought about it. He reminds me of myself. The way he tries so hard to be enough for people who can't fully see him. The way he intellectualizes his pain. The way he's built his life around being helpful and competent while his own emotional needs go unmet. And I think I see him struggling with things I'm struggling with. And I want to tell him it's okay, that he's not alone, that I understand. But I can't. Because that would be making it about me instead of about him. So this isn't really about attraction. It's about recognition. Maybe. I don't know. Does it matter? Either way, I'm too involved. Dr. Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think you should keep seeing him. Shulamite looked up, surprised. What? I think you should keep seeing him, but we need to establish some very clear parameters. First, you're going to continue weekly supervision with me specifically around this case. Second, you're going to start your own therapy. You texted Dr. Chin, yes? Yes. I have my first session next week. Good. You'll process your own feelings there, not in Abel's sessions. Third, you're going to be very honest with yourself about where your boundaries are. If you ever feel like you're at risk of crossing a line, even an emotional one, you come to me immediately and we'll discuss referral. Why not just refer him now? Wouldn't that be safer? Safer for whom? For you? Yes. For him? I'm not sure. He's made significant progress with you. He trusts you. Transferring him now could feel like abandonment, could reinforce his belief that people leave when things get complicated. Dr. Amara leaned forward. Shulamite, you're not the first therapist to develop feelings for a client. It happens. What matters is how you handle it. And so far, you've handled it appropriately. You've maintained boundaries, sought supervision, and been honest with yourself. That's exactly what ethical practice looks like. But what if I can't keep handling it appropriately? Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I have faith in you. And I think this is an opportunity for you to learn something important, how to stay present and connected without losing yourself. How to care deeply without crossing lines. Those are skills that will serve you throughout your career. Shulamite nodded slowly, though she still felt uncertain. Okay. I'll keep seeing him. But I need your help. That's what I'm here for. Over the next several sessions, Shulamite worked hard to maintain the boundaries Dr. Amara had outlined. She continued seeing Abel, continued doing good therapeutic work with him, but she was hyper-aware of her own reactions, her own feelings. Every time she felt that warmth, that dangerous comfort, she noted it mentally and saved it for her own therapy sessions with Dr. Chen. Sarah Chen was exactly what Shulamite needed, direct, insightful, willing to call her out when she was intellectualizing or avoiding. In their second session together, Sarah had said, "You're very good at analyzing your feelings. But when was the last time you actually felt them?" The question had undone something in Shulamite. She'd cried in that session, really cried, for the first time in years. Cried about Marcus, about leaving Atlanta, about the loneliness she'd been carrying. Cried about her fear of being seen, of being vulnerable, of letting anyone close enough to hurt her. And yes, she'd cried about Abel. About the connection she felt with him, about how unfair it was that she'd finally found someone who seemed to understand her and it was in a context where nothing could happen. About how exhausted she was from always being the helper, the one who held space for others while no one held space for her. Sarah had listened, had handed her tissues, had sat with her in that pain without trying to fix it. "It sounds like you're grieving something you never had," Sarah said gently. "Not just with Abel, but in general. You're grieving the possibility of being known, of being chosen, of mattering to someone in the way you've always wanted to matter." "Yes," Shulamite had whispered. "That's exactly it. So what do you need?" "I need to let him go. Not as a client, I know that's not the right move right now. But I need to let go of this fantasy that there could ever be something between us. Because there can't. And holding on to that possibility, even unconsciously, is keeping me stuck." "How will you do that?" "I don't know yet. But I need to figure it out." That conversation had been 2 weeks ago. Now, sitting across from Abel in their 11th session, Shulamite knew what she needed to do. She needed to name what was happening, not explicitly, not in a way that would burden him or make things awkward, but clearly enough that they could both move forward. Abel was talking about his family, about a difficult conversation he'd had with his mother. "She keeps asking when I'm going to find someone new," he said. Like Layla was just a thing to replace. Like relationships are interchangeable. That must be frustrating. It is. But I also understand it. She wants me to be happy. She has a very specific idea of what that looks like, and I don't fit into it. Do you want to fit into it? Abel considered. Sometimes. It would be easier, wouldn't it? To just do what's expected. Marry someone Korean, have kids, make my parents proud. But I can't pretend to want that if I don't. What do you want? I want to be seen. Really seen. Not as a role or a function, but as a whole person. Complicated and flawed and still worthy of love. He looked at her. I think that's what I've always wanted. And I think that's why it hurt so much with Layla, because I thought she saw me, but she didn't. Not really. Shulamite's chest ached. She understood that desire so completely it was almost painful. Abel, she said carefully, I want to talk about something with you. Something about our therapeutic relationship. His expression shifted immediately, cautious, guarded. Okay. Over these past months, we've built a really strong working relationship. You've been vulnerable with me, and I've tried to create a space where that vulnerability feels safe. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen in therapy. But sometimes, when a therapeutic relationship is working well, it can create feelings that are complicated to navigate. Abel was very still. What kind of feelings? Feelings of connection. Of being understood. Of gratitude and trust. She paused. And sometimes those feelings can be confused with other kinds of feelings, romantic or sexual attraction, for example. Is that happening? His voice was carefully neutral. Are you saying you're attracted to me? I'm saying that I care about you deeply as a client, and that in the process of doing this work together, I've become aware that the boundaries between professional care and personal connection can sometimes feel blurry. And I need to be clear, for both of our sakes, that regardless of what either of us might feel, those boundaries are essential and non-negotiable. Abel looked down at his hands. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, he said, You're right. It does get confusing. Tell me what you're feeling right now. Embarrassed. Exposed. He looked up. I thought I was hiding it better. Shulamite felt her heart sink. Hiding what? The fact that these sessions have started to feel like more than therapy. That I look forward to them all week. That I think about things I want to tell you. That sometimes, when you say something particularly insightful, I have this moment of wanting to. He stopped, shaking his head. I'm sorry. This is inappropriate. Don't apologize. What you're describing is actually very common. It's called transference, when feelings from other relationships or unmet needs get transferred onto the therapeutic relationship. It doesn't mean those feelings aren't real. But it does mean they're not really about me. They're about what I represent: safety, understanding, unconditional positive regard. But you're not just representing those things. You actually are those things. At least with me. At least in here. Abel's voice was quiet but intense. So how is that not real? Because it exists in a very specific context. In here, I'm your therapist. I listen without judgment, I hold space for your pain, I offer guidance and support. But out there, she gestured toward the window, toward the world beyond the office, I'm just a person. Flawed and complicated, with my own needs and limitations. The version of me you know is real, but it's not complete. It's a professional role I inhabit for your benefit. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. Abel ran a hand through his hair. But it doesn't change the fact that talking to you feels different than talking to anyone else. That I feel seen by you in a way I've never felt seen by anyone. Shulamite had to take a breath before responding. I understand. And I'm honored that you feel that way. But Abel, that feeling, that sense of being deeply understood, that's not exclusive to me. You can find that with other people. With friends, with a future partner. You just have to be willing to be as vulnerable with them as you've been with me. Have you found it? That kind of connection? The question was pointed, direct. Shulamite knew she should deflect, should bring the focus back to him. But something about this moment demanded honesty. I'm working on it, she said. I've spent a lot of my life avoiding vulnerability, keeping people at arm's length. So no, I haven't found it. But I'm trying to change that. Why did you avoid it? For the same reason a lot of people do. Because vulnerability means risk. It means someone could see all of you and decide you're not enough. And that's terrifying. But you tell me all the time that I'm enough. That I don't need to earn love or prove my worth. I know. And I believe that for you. It's easier to believe it for other people than for ourselves. Abel looked at her with an expression that was both sad and understanding. We're not so different, are we? You and me. No. We're not. They sat in that acknowledgement for a moment. Then Shulamite said, gently but firmly, which is exactly why we need to be very careful about boundaries. Because this recognition, this sense of kinship, it's powerful. But it's also dangerous if we let it become something it's not supposed to be. What is it supposed to be? A therapeutic relationship. One where I help you process your experiences, develop healthier patterns, and move toward your goals. That's it. That's all it can be. And what if I don't want that to be all it is? Shulamite felt her heart rate pick up. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the moment where she had to be absolutely clear even though it would hurt them both. Then we'd need to end our therapeutic relationship, she said. Because I can't be both your therapist and anything else. The ethics are clear. If you want to pursue any kind of personal relationship with me, I would have to refer you to another therapist, and even then, we'd need to wait a significant amount of time before any such relationship would be appropriate. And honestly, Abel, I don't think that's what either of us actually wants. How do you know what I want? Because you came here to heal. To understand yourself better, to process your relationship with Layla, to learn how to have healthier connections. And you've done that work. You've made real progress. But if we cross this line, if we let these feelings become something more, it would undermine everything you've accomplished. You'd be repeating the same pattern, just with a different person. Seeking completion through someone else instead of finding it within yourself. Abel was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. You're right. I know you're right. But it doesn't make it easier. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry if anything I've said or done has made this harder than it needed to be. You haven't. You've been perfect. That's the problem. He laughed bitterly. You've been exactly what I needed, and now I have to accept that what I need isn't something I can keep. Shulamite felt tears prick at her own eyes, but she blinked them back. You can keep what matters. You can keep the growth you've achieved, the insights you've gained, the knowledge that you're capable of being vulnerable and asking for help. Those things are yours. They don't belong to me or to this relationship. They belong to you. Abel nodded, wiping at his eyes. So what happens now? Now we continue our work. We process this conversation. We make sure you feel supported and not abandoned. And we work toward a point where you feel ready to end therapy and move forward on your own. How long will that take? As long as it needs to. There's no rush. But even as she said it, Shulamite knew there was a rush. Because every session was getting harder, every goodbye was leaving her more drained. She needed to help Abel reach a place of stability and completion, and then she needed to let him go. For both their sakes. Over the next month, they did exactly that. They processed the conversation they'd had about boundaries and transference. They talked about what Abel had learned about himself, about relationships, about his own worth. They discussed his plans for the future, professional goals, personal growth, the possibility of dating again when he was ready. And slowly, painfully, they worked toward an ending. Abel seemed to understand what was happening, even though neither of them named it explicitly. He started talking about feeling ready to end therapy, about being in a good place, about wanting to try navigating life without the weekly support. I think I'm ready, he said during their 17th session. Not because I have everything figured out. But because I know I can figure things out. That's different. It is different. And it's a good place to be. Will you miss me? The question was quiet, almost shy. Shulamite allowed herself to be honest. Yes. I'll miss our sessions. I'll wonder how you're doing. But I'll also be proud of you for reaching this point. Can I ask you one more thing? Of course. If circumstances were different, if we'd met some other way, in some other context, do you think we could have been friends? Or more? Shulamite took a long breath. She knew she could deflect this question, could redirect it back to his experience. But she owed him honesty, especially now. I think, in another context, we would have recognized each other. Understood each other. And yes, maybe we could have been friends. She paused. But Abel, we didn't meet in another context. We met this way, in this specific dynamic. And I believe that happened for a reason. You needed a therapist, not a friend or a romantic partner. You needed someone who could be objective and boundaried and focused entirely on your growth. And that's what I've tried to be. You've been more than that. Maybe. But even if I have been, the boundaries still matter. They've protected both of us from something that would have caused more harm than good. Abel nodded, accepting this. Thank you. For everything. For being honest, even when it was hard. That's my job. No. It's who you are. They agreed that their next session would be their last. Shulamite spent the week preparing, making sure she had resources to give him, therapist referrals in case he needed support in the future, reminders about the progress he'd made. But she also spent that week grieving. Grieving the end of something that had mattered more than it should have. Grieving the connection she'd felt, even if that connection had to remain within professional boundaries. Grieving the possibility of what could have been if their circumstances had been different. In her session with Dr. Chen, she'd cried again. I did the right thing, she said. I know I did the right thing. But it still hurts. Of course it hurts. You care about him. And you're letting him go. That's always painful, even when it's necessary. Will I ever stop thinking about him? Eventually. But right now, you need to let yourself feel this. Don't intellectualize it or minimize it. Just feel it. So Shulamite let herself feel it. The loss, the longing, the deep ache of unmet connection. She sat with it, cried about it, wrote about it in her journal. And slowly, day by day, it became a little more bearable. Their final session arrived on a Thursday afternoon, warm and bright. Abel came in looking calm, more settled than she'd seen him since their first meeting. How are you feeling? Shulamite asked. Good. Nervous. Sad. But also ready. They spent the session reviewing everything he'd learned, everything he'd accomplished. Shulamite gave him the resources she'd prepared, reminded him that reaching out for help again in the future wasn't a sign of failure but of self-awareness. You've done incredible work, she said. You came in feeling lost and inadequate, and you're leaving with a much clearer sense of yourself and what you deserve. That's huge. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have. Maybe not as quickly, maybe not as smoothly. But the capacity for growth was always in you. I just helped you access it. As the session wound down, Abel stood to leave. He extended his hand for a final handshake, and Shulamite took it. His grip was warm, firm, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Take care of yourself, he said. You too. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Shulamite? Yes? I hope you find it. That connection you're looking for. You deserve it. Her throat tightened. Thank you. I hope you find it too. And then he was gone. Shulamite sat alone in her office for a long time after he left. She didn't cry. She just sat in the quiet, feeling the weight of the ending, the bittersweetness of having done the right thing even though it hurt. Eventually, she opened her laptop and started typing up her final session notes. As she wrote, she realized something. This had been one of the most important cases of her career, not because of the clinical complexity but because of what it had taught her about herself. She'd learned that she could care deeply without losing her professional boundaries. She'd learned that connection was possible even within ethical constraints. She'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you could do for someone was to maintain the structure they needed, even when it meant denying what you both might want. And she'd learned that she was lonely, deeply, achingly lonely, and that no amount of professional success or helping others could fill that void. She needed to do her own work, to open herself up to real connection in her personal life, to stop hiding behind her role as therapist. She closed her laptop and looked out the window at Dubai's skyline, golden in the late afternoon light. Somewhere out there, Abel was continuing his life, carrying forward the work they'd done together. And she was here, doing the same. They would probably never see each other again. That was for the best. But she would remember him. She would remember what it felt like to be truly understood, even if only in the safe confines of a therapy office. She would remember the risk and reward of allowing herself to care. She would remember that it was possible to do the right thing even when it cost something. That evening, Shulamite did something she almost never did. She called her sister in Atlanta. Shulamite? Her sister's voice was surprised, pleased. Is everything okay? Yeah. I wanted to talk. Is this a good time? Always. They talked for 2 hours. About family, about work, about loneliness and connection and what it meant to build a life. Shulamite told her sister about considering a move back to the States eventually, about feeling ready to stop running, about wanting to be closer to people who knew her. I'm proud of you, her sister said. I know how hard it is for you to open up like this. I'm trying. It's still hard. But I'm trying. After they hung up, Shulamite felt lighter than she had in weeks. She made herself dinner, did some yoga, read a book. Normal evening things, but they felt different somehow. More present, more grounded. Before bed, she checked her email and found a message from Abel. The subject line was simply "Thank you." She hesitated before opening it, knowing she probably shouldn't read it, knowing that maintaining the boundary meant not continuing contact after therapy ended. But curiosity won. The email was short. Dr. Frankie, I know we said goodbye today, and I'm not reaching out to continue therapy or to cross any lines. I just wanted to say thank you one more time, in a way that felt complete. You changed my life. Not because you told me what to do or fixed me, but because you helped me see myself clearly. You gave me permission to want more, to expect more, to believe I deserved more. And you did it while maintaining boundaries that protected us both. I know our connection felt complicated sometimes. But I understand now that the boundaries weren't restrictions, they were the container that made the real work possible. If we'd crossed those lines, I would have just been repeating old patterns. Looking for someone else to complete me instead of learning to be whole on my own. I'm working on that now. Being whole on my own. It's hard, but I'm doing it. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're letting people see you the way you helped me see myself. You deserve that. Thank you for everything. Abel. Shulamite read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He understood. He really understood. And that understanding felt like a gift, like closure, like the validation that she'd done exactly what she was supposed to do. She closed the email without responding. That was the right choice. The professional choice. The choice that honored the work they'd done and the boundaries that had made it possible. But she saved the email. Kept it in a folder she'd probably never open again but couldn't quite delete. A small acknowledgement of something that had mattered, even if it had to end. 3 months later, Shulamite was in her own therapy session with Dr. Chen, talking about her progress. I've been reaching out more, she said. To my sister, to some friends back home. I even went on a date last week. It didn't go anywhere, but I went. That's something. That's definitely something. How did it feel? Scary. Awkward. But also kind of exciting? Like I'm finally participating in my own life instead of just observing it. That's growth. I know. I can see it happening. And it's weird because I always thought, if I just work hard enough, help enough people, be good enough at my job, the rest will fall into place. But it doesn't work that way. I have to actually show up for myself the way I show up for my clients. And are you? Showing up for yourself? I'm trying. Some days are better than others. But I'm trying. Dr. Chen smiled. That's all any of us can do. After the session, Shulamite walked through the Dubai marina, watching the boats in the water, the people going about their lives. She thought about Abel sometimes, wondered how he was doing, hoped he was happy. But the sharpness of missing him had faded into something gentler, a quiet gratitude for the time they'd shared and the lessons they'd both learned. She pulled out her phone and texted her sister, thinking about coming home for a visit soon. Maybe next month? The response came quickly, yes. Let me know dates. Can't wait to see you. Shulamite smiled. Home. Maybe it was time to figure out where that actually was, who she wanted to be when she wasn't behind the therapist's desk. Maybe it was time to let herself be seen. 6 months after their final session, Abel was sitting in a cafe in Dubai Marina, working on lesson plans for the next school term, when someone sat down at the table next to him. He glanced up out of habit and froze. Shulamite. She was with someone, a woman, both of them laughing about something, clearly friends. She hadn't seen him yet, was focused on her companion, and Abel had a split second to decide whether to say something or let the moment pass. He chose to let it pass. Not because he was avoiding her or because the feelings were still too raw, but because he understood now what she'd been trying to tell him all along. Their connection had been real, but it had existed in a specific context, for a specific purpose. And that purpose had been fulfilled. He didn't need closure or continuation or any kind of acknowledgement. He just needed to let her be a person living her life, the same way he was living his. But as he gathered his things to leave, she looked up. Their eyes met. And in that brief moment, there was recognition, warmth, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them. Shulamite smiled slightly, a small nod. Abel returned it. And then he left, walking out into the bright Dubai afternoon, feeling something that might have been peace. Later that evening, Shulamite thought about the encounter. She'd recognized Abel immediately, had felt that familiar pull of connection. But she'd also felt something new, pride, maybe, or satisfaction. They'd both moved forward. They'd both done the hard work of letting go and choosing themselves. She wondered if he was dating anyone, if he'd found what he was looking for. She hoped so. She hoped he was happy. And as for herself? She was getting there. She'd started making plans to move back to Atlanta in 6 months, to be closer to family and old friends, to build a life that felt more like home. She was dating, casually, with appropriate boundaries and realistic expectations. She was learning to be vulnerable, to ask for what she needed, to believe she deserved good things. It was slow work. Messy work. But it was her work, and she was finally doing it. That night, she sat down at her computer and started writing. Not session notes, not clinical observations, but something personal. A reflection on what she'd learned from Abel's case, from the whole complicated experience of caring too much and maintaining boundaries anyway. She wrote about the importance of professional ethics, yes. But she also wrote about the human cost of those ethics, the way they sometimes meant sacrificing connection for the greater good. She wrote about loneliness and recognition, about what it meant to be truly seen, about the courage it took to hold space for others while also holding space for yourself. She didn't know if she'd ever share what she wrote. Maybe it was just for her, a way of processing, of making meaning out of something difficult. But as she typed, she felt something shift inside her. A settling, a resolution. She'd done the right thing. It had been hard, and it had hurt, but it had been right. And now, finally, she could move forward. Not away from the experience, but through it. Taking the lessons with her, letting the pain fade, grateful for what it had taught her about herself and about the work she'd chosen to do. Somewhere in the city, Abel was doing the same. Moving forward, carrying his own lessons, grateful for what he'd learned. They would probably never speak again. They would probably never know the full story of how the other's life unfolded. But they would both remember.